A 29-year-old guy named Fujinuma Satoru goes to an interview for an art gig, but it doesn't pan out, and he heads home feeling pretty bummed about his life choices. Later, while working at his pizza delivery job, he's out on a run when something weird happens. Time rewinds, and he's reliving the same moment. He realizes something's off and starts looking around to figure out what's wrong. That's when he spots a truck driver, totally out cold, speeding toward a kid crossing the street. Satoru acts fast, swerves his bike toward the truck, and manages to stop it, but not without getting hit by a car in the process. Next thing he knows, Satoru wakes up in the hospital. His co-worker and former classmate, Katagiri Airi, is there to check on him. She tells him he's been out for 2 days and asks if he remembers who he is and what happened. He tells her his name, age, and how he ended up in the hospital. Airi says it's crazy he didn't get seriously hurt and asks if there's anyone she should call for him, but he brushes it off, saying there's no one. She mentions she saw the whole thing go down and thinks it's amazing how he saved that kid. Then she tells him the truck driver had a heart attack behind the wheel and didn't make it. She also let their manager know what happened, so he doesn't need to stress about the bike and should just focus on coming back to work. Satoru asks her about her dream job, but she dodges the question, saying they're not close enough for that kind of talk, and leaves. On his way home, Satoru reflects on what he calls revival, this weird ability he has where time jumps back a few minutes before something bad happens, giving him a chance to stop it. Thanks to this, he's been able to prevent a bunch of accidents. When he gets home, his mom, Fujinuma Sachiko, is there cooking. She says she came by the hospital to check on him, but he was out cold, so she decided to stay at his place for a bit. Satoru suggests she get a hotel instead, but she's not having it. They see a news report about a first grader who went missing but was later found safe. Sachiko then asks Satoru if he remembers an incident from when he was in 5th grade. As he lies down to sleep, he starts thinking about it. Back then, there was this guy named Yuki-san who used to hang out with him, but 6 months after the incident, a man named Shiratori Jun, who was Yuki, got arrested as a serial kidnapper. Satoru and his mom are leaving the mall when revival kicks in again. He's trying to figure out what's wrong but can't find anything, so he asks his mom to look around and see if anything feels off. She notices this dude with glasses staring at her while covering part of his face and holding onto a girl, but then he gets into his car and drives off alone. She snaps a picture of his car just as Ari calls Satoru and joins them. Sachiko, Satoru's mom, invites Ari over for dinner, and she agrees, all while the guy in glasses is creeping on them from a distance. At home, Sachiko cooks dinner and calls everyone to eat. She jokes about thinking Ari might be Satoru's girlfriend but says she was wrong. Ari sets the record straight, saying Satoru's just a friend she looks up to. After dinner, Ari gets ready to leave, and Satoru offers to walk her to the station. When he gets back home, he tells his mom to stop acting like Ari's his future wife, but Sachiko teases him, saying he might have a shot with her. Then, Sachiko casually mentions that someone tried to kidnap a kid in the supermarket parking lot, but quickly says she's joking. Later, at a shop, Satoru spots the name of his old classmate, Hinazuki Kayo, the girl who was kidnapped and murdered years ago. He remembers seeing her alone at the park, the last time he ever saw her alive. Meanwhile, Sachiko is still thinking about what happened in the parking lot and suspects it might have been a kidnapping attempt. She recalls how the man covered his face when he looked at her, meaning he probably recognized her. She keeps mulling it over, saying she knows those eyes from somewhere. Suddenly, it clicks. She remembers who he is. She starts thinking maybe Shiratori Jun wasn't the real culprit after all. On her way home, she's piecing it all together, remembering the guy's past crimes and realizing the case isn't over yet. She plans to tell Satoru everything, but before she can, she hears footsteps behind her. A man in a suit and glasses stabs her in the back. As she collapses, she looks at him and realizes she was right. It's the guy from the parking lot. She tries to call Satoru, but it's no use. When Satoru heads home, he crosses paths with the man in glasses, who just walks by like nothing happened. Satoru notices his front door is open and rushes inside to check on his mom, only to find her lying dead in a pool of blood. A neighbor walks in, sees the blood on Satoru's hands, and immediately assumes he's the killer. She calls the cops, and Satoru takes off running. As he's on the run, revival kicks in again, and he's sent back to 1988, when he was just a kid. Satoru heads to class and notices the date, February 15th. The teacher walks in and tells him to grab a seat. He's confused about where to sit and picks an empty desk, but the kid next to him says, "Hey, that's Hinazuki's desk." Satoru starts questioning if all this is real since his revival has thrown him 18 years into the past. During the break, he grabs his bag and leaves the classroom. As he rushes out, he passes Hinazuki and heads home to check on his mom. When he gets home, she's not there, and he remembers she's probably still at work. He goes inside and waits. Eventually, his mom, Sachiko, comes home and wakes him up. She asks what he wants for dinner and starts cooking. While they eat, she mentions how earlier he freaked out over his missing recorder. Satoru breaks down crying and apologizes to her. He realizes this revival is like a do-over and promises himself to never waste the time he's been given. After dinner, he thanks his mom for the meal. The next day at school, Satoru wonders if he's really about to relive 18 years of his life. He figures if this is a revival, it's gotta be so he can stop something bad from happening, starting with saving his mom. Then he notices Hinazuki Kayo in class. He sees a bruise on her leg and starts remembering people's names as the teacher puts them into groups. In his group, Kenya Kenya asks if Satoru likes Hinazuki. Satoru says no, but admits she's been on his mind. Kazu says he'll help him talk to her after school. Later, Satoru approaches Hinazuki and asks if they can be friends. She's skeptical and asks what made him think they could be, saying she gets it because he's fake, just like her. As she walks away, Satoru calls out that he really does want to be her friend. Hinazuki turns and asks if he'd kill someone for her, then walks off as a man in uniform watches them. Back in class, Kazu asks how it went with Hinazuki. Satoru says they just talked, but Kazu tells him he's got a shot. Kenya chimes in, saying they'll still be in the same class next year, so he should take it slow. After school, Satoru thanks Kenya for earlier. Kenya says it must mean something if Hinazuki's been on his mind and tells him to come to them if he needs help. Satoru says it was thanks to Kazu he even got to talk to her. Kenya asks how the conversation went. Just as Kenya starts asking if Satoru has read the student anthology, a car speeds past them. Back at his place, Satoru flips through the student anthology and spots Hinazuki's essay called "The Town with Only Me Erased." In it, she writes about wanting to escape to some far-off island where there's no one around. No pain, no problems. A place where she can do whatever she wants and think about her town, as if she's the only one who's disappeared from it. Satoru figures her essay is a total SOS, but he shuts the book quick when his mom shows up. At dinner, Satoru asks his mom if he can have some friends over for a birthday party. She's cool with it, but says their tiny apartment can't handle too many people. He tells her not to stress, he only needs space for 5. His mom, Sachiko, is surprised since he's never asked for something like this before, and even offers to get him a big cake. Meanwhile, Satoru's already plotting how to get closer to Hinazuki. As he's lying in bed, lost in thought, Sachiko teases him, asking if he's got a girlfriend. He just pretends to be asleep. The next day at school, Osamu tells Satoru that Hinazuki's leaving and asks if he's gonna go after her. Satoru thanks him and takes off to find her. While searching, he starts thinking Hinazuki's mom might be abusing her, which is why she's always hanging out at the park until it's super late. He eventually spots her and calls out. She's like, "What are you doing here?" He tells her he wants to be her friend but jokes that he's not about to kill anyone for her. She laughs it off, saying she was just kidding, but then asks if he's faking his smile. Satoru admits she might be right, that he does want people to like him, that he wants friends. She tells him that if you fake it long enough, it kinda becomes real. Satoru suddenly remembers Eri saying the exact same thing, and it hits him with a wave of nostalgia. He invites Hinazuki to his birthday party and asks if she'll come. She says yes and takes off running. Satoru watches her go and promises himself he's not gonna leave her alone. He swears he's gonna change the future. At school, the kids are playing an ice hockey match. Satoru is up against Hamada. Satoru brags about being a starter on the team that won the national championship. One of the girls tells Hinazuki to wish Satoru good luck, and she does. When the race kicks off, Satoru takes off super fast, leaving Hamada in the dust. But then he starts wondering if winning even matters, so he lets Hamada pass him and ends up losing. Afterward, Hamada storms over, grabs Satoru by the shirt, and tells him he hates him. That's when Satoru realizes he just repeated a mistake he made 18 years ago. Back at school, Satoru tries to ask Hinazuki when her birthday is, but she doesn't respond. Instead, she says he promised not to lie to her. Satoru apologizes, explaining he felt like the day should have been Hamada's moment. Hinazuki brushes him off, saying it's fine because they're both just pretending and lying anyway. Hiromi shows up and suggests they walk home together, but Satoru tells him to go ahead. Satoru heads to the staff room to find a book but gets interrupted by his teacher, Yashiro Gaku. Yashiro asks if he's there because of Hinazuki. Satoru says no, and explains he just wanted to know her birthday. Yashiro shows him the book, and Satoru's stunned to see they share the same birthday. Yashiro explains that Hinazuki is shy, and probably didn't mention it. He suggests Satoru should celebrate with her and make it special. Satoru goes to the park to find Hinazuki, but doesn't see her. A paper plane flies by, and he spots Yuki-san. Back at Yuki's place, Satoru asks if he knows Hinazuki. Yuki says he's talked to her a few times at the park. Satoru remembers when the police questioned Yuki and decides to leave. On his way home, Satoru convinces himself there's no way Yuki could hurt anyone, and vows to figure things out. When Satoru gets home, the front door is locked, so he goes around back. While trying the back door, he steps on a glove and follows some footprints to a small shed. Inside, he finds Hinazuki lying on the ground, covered in bruises. She tells him not to look at her and to shut the door. Satoru takes off his jacket to cover her, but she freaks out and yells at him to leave. Suddenly, her mom shows up, shoves Satoru aside, and grabs Hinazuki by the neck to drag her home. When Satoru asks about Hinazuki's bruises, she says she fell. At home, Hinazuki's mom forces her face into a sink full of ice water. She tells her to get her face looking normal by Monday, or she'll take all the blame. The next day at school, Satoru is waiting for Hinazuki, but she's a no-show at first. When she finally shows up, she walks in late and heads straight to her seat. As she takes off her scarf to sit down, Satoru notices a nasty bruise on the back of her neck. Later, in the staff room, Yashiro asks Satoru if he knows why Hinazuki is always late on Mondays. Satoru straight up tells him it's because her mom beats her on Saturdays. Yashiro says he's noticed too, but he can't bring it up in class since he doesn't want her to be singled out or treated differently. He explains that they started suspecting Hinazuki's mom around May last year, but nothing's been done about it. Satoru asks why, and Yashiro says it's because her mom is really good at covering it up. He mentions that the Child Welfare Center center has already visited their home 3 times just last month, but they still haven't managed to properly investigate. Yoshiro tells Satoru that all they need is solid proof, and they'll do their best to get Hinazuki away from her mom, but he also warns that if that happens, Hinazuki probably won't be in their class anymore. Satoru says he doesn't care, as long as she's safe. Back in class, Satoru announces to the teacher that he lost everyone's lunch money. A girl named Misato immediately stands up and accuses Hinazuki of stealing it. Satoru asks her why she thinks that, and Misato says it's because Hinazuki hasn't paid for her lunch. She suggests they check everyone's bags. As the class starts searching, Hinazuki pulls out the money herself, and everyone starts laughing at her. Satoru shuts them down, telling them to quit it. He says Hinazuki would never steal, even if she's broke. Yoshiro steps in and tells the class that Hinazuki is on lunch duty, so it makes sense for her to have the money. After school, while walking together, Hinazuki thanks Satoru for sticking up for her. She tells him how Misato has always hated her, but there was this one time Misato invited her over for Christmas, just to show off her massive Christmas tree. Satoru suggests they go check out a tree today. That night, they climb up a hill to get a good view of a big tree. Satoru tells her they should come back during the summer to see it again. Meanwhile, back at school, Kenya is having a secret conversation with someone. Satoru explains that in a week, Hinazuki Kaio is going to be the first victim in a string of kidnappings and murders. He's determined to stop it, planning to throw her a birthday party and make sure nothing bad happens. He's set on erasing those crimes from history. While Satoru and his mom, Sachiko, are having breakfast, he tells her he wants to go out on Saturday. She teases him, asking if it's a date, and he admits it is. She suggests he bring the girl over, but he says she's already coming to his birthday party. Sachiko tells him to be careful when he goes out. At school, Satoru is figuring out how to get Hinazuki away from her abusive mom. He suggests to his friends that they all visit the science center on Saturday, but they turn him down, saying if he's going with Hinazuki, he doesn't need them tagging along. Hinazuki overhears and asks if something's up. Satoru tells her he told his friends he couldn't hang out because he's got a date with her. She mentions her mom told her to come straight home on Saturdays. Satoru says he wants to take her somewhere and offers to talk to her mom about it. Later, in the locker room, Yoshiro calls Kenya to the staff room. That evening, at Hinazuki's house, her mom refuses to let her go out with Satoru, saying 2 kids shouldn't be out alone. Satoru explains they're not just going to play, they're going to learn stuff. He asks why she's so against it, and she says it's because they're kids. Saturdays are when Hinazuki helps out at home. She then asks Satoru what he gets out of taking her out. He blurts out that he just wants to save his friend, immediately realizing he shouldn't have said that. Hinazuki's mom asks her if she even wants to go, and when Hinazuki nods, her mom tries to slap her. Sachiko steps in and stops her. Hinazuki's mom tells Sachiko to mind her own business, but Sachiko says it is her business since her son is involved. She tells Hinazuki to go back inside. On the way home, Satoru asks his mom if she knows what's going on. Sachiko says she doesn't, but after talking to Hinazuki's mom and seeing her behavior, she has a pretty good idea. The next day, Satoru and Hinazuki visit the science center. Hinazuki comments on how empty it is. As they chat, Satoru notices something familiar happening and excuses himself to the bathroom. He wonders if it's deja vu but brushes it off. When he comes back, the same thing happens again. Hinazuki thanks him for inviting her and asks if he knew she liked the place. Satoru starts wondering if he picked the science center because he somehow knew she liked it. Lost in thought, he's startled when she repeats something he was just thinking. Suddenly, he remembers having this exact conversation 18 years ago when he first met Hinazuki. He starts questioning if he's been stuck repeating the past while trying to change the future. He helps her with her coat, and she tells him she's happy she could come. Later, their friends show up, and they all have fun together. The next day in class, Hinazuki shows up early and says hi to Satoru. As class starts, Satoru can't stop thinking about how Hinazuki is supposed to be killed the next day and how the real fight to save her is about to begin. After class, while they're walking home, Satoru tells her he'll swing by to pick her up in the morning so they can walk to school together. The next day, Satoru gets up early, rushes over to Hinazuki's house, grabs her hand, and they head to school together. After class, he suggests they hit up the kids' center, but she says she wants to head home early. He insists, so they hang out at the center and have a good time, but she still says she wants to go home. While they're walking back, they pass the park where she was killed 18 years ago, and Satoru grips her hand tightly. He drops her off at home and promises to pick her up again the next day. The following morning, Satoru wakes up super early and heads to Hinazuki's house. When she opens the door, she finds him already waiting outside. At school, Yoshiro asks them to help him with some work. Later, they go shopping together to get stuff for his birthday. When they get back, they're surprised by their friends and Sachiko, who throw them a surprise birthday party. Satoru asks how they managed to plan it without him knowing, and Kenya explains that they had Yoshiro keep him busy after school. Hinazuki apologizes for not getting Satoru a gift, but he tells her it's no big deal. She can give it to him later. While everyone's having fun, Satoru gives Hinazuki a gift, and she thanks him and everyone else. After the party, he walks her home, and she promises to give him his gift the next day. Feeling like he's changed the future, Satoru heads home and sleeps soundly. The next day, Satoru oversleeps and has to book it to school, but makes it just in time. However, Yoshiro announces that Hinazuki is the only one who hasn't shown up. Satoru's face tightens with worry as it hits him. Hinazuki didn't come to class, and the promise they made was never kept. Satoru's wondering wondering why Hinazuki's late for class. He's zoning out until Yoshiro snaps him back to reality, asking if something's bugging him. After class, Satoru bolts to Hinazuki's house. He knocks, but no one answers. He heads to the back of the house and spots some rubber boot prints. Meanwhile, Hinazuki's dad is hiding and asks her mom what they should do. Satoru's eyes well up with tears as he heads to the park, but Hinazuki's not there either. The next day, Satoru sees his mom chatting with a TV reporter and figures he's one of her old co-workers. Sachiko tells him it's not his fault. Satoru says he doesn't want Hinazuki to be alone anymore. She tells him there's no point in beating himself up over things that have already happened. She says he should go back to school because being alone will just make him feel worse. Later at school, Yoshiro tells the class that the story about Hinazuki staying home sick was a lie. He says she's been sent to her grandma's place in Sapporo for family reasons, and that she's doing fine. The class starts gossiping about Hinazuki, but Satoru's friends try to cheer him up. In the staff room, Yoshiro tells Satoru that the story about Hinazuki was something the school and PTA agreed on, and he asks Satoru to go along with it for now. Satoru explains there's a media blackout, but a police car has been parked near Hinazuki's house for days. He says her mom's a suspect, and just 6 days after Hinazuki disappeared, someone else was reported missing. Back in class, Yoshiro tells the students they can only leave school with a guardian. After class, Kenya asks Satoru if he's heard about Nakanishi Aya from Izumi Elementary. Kenya says a friend told him she ran away to her grandpa's place. Satoru says that sounds just like Hinazuki. As time goes on, Satoru realizes history's repeating itself. He notices the police car near Hinazuki's house isn't there as much anymore after Aya's disappearance. He figures the investigation's shifted to a serial kidnapping case. While walking, he sees Hinazuki's mom throwing out a trash bag with half-finished knit gloves inside. He realizes it's the gift Hinazuki was making for him and screams as he runs off. Suddenly, he wakes up in 2006, back to when he was running from the cops. He peeks out and sees the police searching for him as the main suspect in his mom's murder. They even have an eyewitness. He knows he has to get ready to run. Hiding under a bridge, he tries to figure out why his mom was killed. He gets a call from a coworker and meets up with him. The coworker says Eri's worried about him but tells him to eat first. After eating, the coworker says Satoru can stay as long as he needs and leaves the room. Satoru turns on the news and sees a report about his mom's murder, with him being named the killer. Looking out the window, he spots his coworker talking to the cops. Satoru sneaks out and runs into Eri outside. She tells him to hop on her bike, and they take off. At her house, Satoru apologizes for dragging her into this mess and asks why she's helping him. She says there's no way someone who cared so much about his mom could have killed her. She's like, I can't believe they're after you when you're the one who's been hurt the most. Then she says she read the part in the book he left at work, the one he bookmarked. Turns out, it's about the Hinazuki Keiyo murder case, where Keiyo gets killed during the doll festival on March 3rd. He grabs the book and realizes the stuff inside has changed. That's when it hits him. If he goes back in time one more time, he might still be able to save Keiyo. The next day, he wakes up in Eri's room and finds a letter she left for him. Satoru starts trying to figure out how to catch his mom's killer. When he goes back to Eri's place, her manager tries to call the cops, but Eri steps in and asks him what's up with that. Before he can really explain, she straight up decks him in the face. Afterward, he tells her he's just worried about her. She snaps back, saying if he's so worried, he shouldn't be calling the cops on the family that's looking after her. Later, she meets Satoru at the bridge and says sorry, but he's like, nah, it's cool. I actually got some rest, so thanks. Then he asks her why she trusts him. She says it's not that she can trust him, it's that she wants to. Satoru tells her to go home and tell the cops he forced her to hide him. She says fine, but only so she can grab him a fresh set of clothes. While she's packing, she sees a text pop up on her phone and realizes it's from the killer. Then she notices smoke coming from her door. Yep, the killer set her house on fire. She tries to get out, but ends up passing out on the floor. Satoru sees the house up in flames and hears that Eri's trapped inside. Without wasting a second, he bolts into the burning house to find her. He eventually spots her lying on the floor and picks her up. While he's carrying her, she slips her phone into his pocket. As Satoru searches for a way out through the fire, their manager shows up to help. The manager tells Satoru to head out through the back to avoid dragging Eri into more trouble. Under a bridge, Satoru worries about whether Eri will be okay. He suspects the fire was the work of the killer, and notices a text on the phone Eri slipped him. That's when it clicks. The killer set the fire to take Eri out and frame him for it. Satoru realizes Eri gave him her phone so the cops wouldn't find the text. Determined, he decides he's either going to catch the killer or go down trying. The next day, Satoru calls a guy at an office and introduces himself. The guy responds, saying it's a pleasure if he really is Fujinuma Satoru. Satoru asks for the guy's name, but he says they'll save that for when they meet tomorrow. The following day, Satoru meets the guy at a shop. The guy introduces himself as Sawada, a former reporter for the TV Ishikari City desk. Satoru remembers him as the guy who talked to his mom when Hinazuki went missing. Sawada tells Satoru he didn't call the cops, and that he didn't kill his mom either. Satoru asks why Sawada doesn't suspect him. Sawada says a mom like Sachiko wouldn't raise a murderer. He then says they need to talk about what Sachiko mentioned on the phone. A flashback shows Sachiko calling Sawada, asking if he remembers the serial murder case from 18 years ago. Sawada says Shiratori Jun is on death row, but still hasn't confessed. Sachiko tells him Jun is innocent, and that she knows who the real killer is. Back in the present, Sawada tells Satoru there's an old case they need to go over. It's about Hinazuki Keio's murder. Another flashback starts, this time to the night of March 2nd, 1988. Sawada explains that Hinazuki was locked in a shed after being beaten by her mom and froze to death. At first, the cops thought her mom hid the body, but Hinazuki disappeared from the shed on March 2nd. By March 3rd, when her mom realized she was gone, she casually called Sachiko to ask if she'd seen Hinazuki. Sawada says Hinazuki was kidnapped by Shiratori Jun. He then lays out the official version of events. Satoru insists that Yuki, Shiratori Jun's nickname, would never do something like that. Sawada explains that before Hinazuki, two other kids, Sugita Hiromi and Nakanishi Aya, disappeared, and there were similar kidnapping and murder cases in a nearby town. The guy they caught for those crimes also denied doing anything wrong, just like Shiratori. Sawada asks Satoru if he notices any patterns when he thinks about what's happening to him now. That's when it hits Satoru. Hinazuki and Sachiko were both killed by someone who pins their crimes on others. At the hospital, Eri steps out of her room and overhears two bodyguards talking about how Satoru forced her to help him take out his mom and then tried to shut her up afterward. While checking the newspaper, she's shocked they're pinning murder and arson on Satoru. She wonders who would even believe her, but her thoughts are interrupted by someone. Back at the office, Satoru hands Sawada the phone Eri slipped into his pocket. Sawada explains that the killer is trying to mess with the investigation by framing Satoru for arson. Satoru says he's worried Eri might be a target too. He tells Sawada about his mom's murder and thinks the killer might be someone he knows. Sawada suggests they could use this info to track the guy down. He tells Satoru he's heading to the hospital and suggests Satoru check out the reports on the murders from 18 years ago on his computer. When Sawada gets to the hospital, he finds out there's only one room available, room 201. He sneaks past the bodyguards and enters Eri's room, but he's stunned to find her mom in the bed instead of Eri. Meanwhile, Eri tells her mom there's no way Satoru could have killed his mom. She explains how he saved her from the fire and vents about how everyone thinks she's in on it and nobody believes her or Satoru. Her mom reassures her, says she believes her, and tells her to leave. As Eri leaves the hospital, a car starts tailing her. She calls Satoru and tells him to meet her at their usual spot. They meet under the bridge, and Eri says she's most suspicious of Nishizono. She mentions how the manager treats him with respect and guesses from his badge that he's probably a city councilor. Satoru says he didn't see that name on the list and tries to figure out what's going on. Eri tells him not to beat himself up over it. Satoru says he's lucky to have met her. Suddenly, they hear footsteps and realize the cops have surrounded them. Satoru gets arrested for murder and attempted murder by arson. As he's being taken away, he spots the man he saw the night his mom was killed. The cops take Satoru to their car, but he's like, I've got unfinished business. He wishes he could get another shot at his revival power. He screams and bam, he's back at the science center with Hinazuki. His friends show up and he's thinking, this is it, no do-overs. I've got to nail it this time. He calls it the final revival. On their way home, Satoru says he'll treat everyone to pancakes. Kenya asks if he's read the book he lent him, but Satoru's like, nah dude, how am I supposed to remember a book I borrowed 18 years ago? Kenya tells him to check it out when he gets home. When Satoru gets home, his mom greets him, saying dinner's almost ready, but then she notices him just standing there crying. She asks if he had a fight with Hinazuki, but Satoru changes the subject, telling her she can take a direct train to Ueno and to remember that. The next day, Satoru heads to school with Hinazuki. He's determined and knows he can't be picky about how he handles things this time. In class, Satoru apologizes to Kenya for losing the book. Kenya pulls him aside and says, don't sweat it, that book doesn't even exist. Kenya's noticed Satoru acting different lately, more serious. He's cool with it but asks, who even are you? You seem like a whole new person. Satoru jokes, I'm a superhero, and Kenya cracks up. Then Satoru drops the bomb. Hinazuki's going to be murdered. He tells Kenya about her abuse and promises to stop it. Kenya's all in and says he'll help. They shake on it. Later, Yoshiro makes them stand in the hallway holding buckets of water as punishment. After class, Satoru ropes Kenya and Hiromi into helping him take Hinazuki to the kids center. Later, Satoru stops by Yuki's house and asks if he's seen Hinazuki. Yuki says no, and Satoru figures the killer must have seen him and Hinazuki together and decided to frame Yuki. Satoru heads to the kids center and finds everyone playing basketball. He reminds himself not to make any big moves before March 2nd, or things could spiral out of control. March 1st passes just like before, and then it's game time. X day. Satoru's ready to rewrite the future. He spots Hinazuki's mom and plans to take her out of the picture, but Kenya stops him, telling him to chill. Kenya admits he's been tailing Satoru for 2 days. He knows Satoru's so desperate to save Hinazuki that he's not thinking about his own safety. Satoru asks Kenya to help him get the cops involved to stop Hinazuki's mom. Kenya warns it'll cause a huge scene, but Satoru doesn't care as long as Hinazuki survives, even if it means he gets in trouble. After Hinazuki's birthday party, Satoru offers to walk her home. On the way, he tells her, I'm gonna kidnap you. He takes her to an abandoned bus and says it's the clubhouse for the Azumi Elementary hockey team. Kenya shows up. and as they set up the bus, he's like, "This place is actually kinda dope. I wouldn't mind living here solo." Satoru tells Hinazuki he'll come back later that night and knock 3 times. She thanks them both as they leave. Satoru thanks Kenya, but Kenya brushes it off, saying the hard part hasn't even started yet. He tells Satoru to play dumb if things go public. Back home, Satoru asks his mom if Hinazuki's mom called, but she says no. He tells her not to stay up for him since he's got an early start tomorrow. Satoru sneaks out to meet Hinazuki. He knocks 3 times and she lets him in. He gives her a cup of noodles, and as she eats, she says she's never had a night like this before. Satoru tells her he's planning a summer camping trip with Kenya and the gang and invites her to join. The next morning, Kenya wakes them up, warning they need to leave before the Izumi kids show up. At school, Yoshiro takes attendance and notices Hinazuki is late. Kenya reassures Satoru, saying nothing's happened yet and they shouldn't panic. Meanwhile, Hinazuki, still in the bus, hears someone come in. Thinking it's Satoru, she looks up to see an unknown man. Hinazuki hears footsteps and thinks it's Satoru, but she quickly realizes it's not him. Some random guy tries to force his way into the bus. After a while, it goes quiet. She sneaks a look out the window and lets out a big sigh of relief when she doesn't see anyone anymore. At home, Sachiko is making breakfast. Satoru asks her why she's up so early. While they're eating, Sachiko says she has something to ask him. She asks what he's been doing so early and who he's been with. He just tells her it's a secret. Before he leaves, Sachiko hands him a packed lunch and says he'll need it since he's heading out so early. Satoru meets up with Hinazuki and gives her the lunch. He apologizes for leaving her alone. Then he heads off to school, promising her he'll be back later. At school, Yoshiro mentions that Hinazuki is absent again and starts the class. Later in the staff room, Satoru tells Yoshiro he stopped by her place that morning. Yoshiro says he must be worried, but he seems so calm about it. Yoshiro adds that he even called her mom's workplace, but they said she hadn't shown up for work. Satoru asks if they can call the cops or child services. Yoshiro says he already reached out to child welfare yesterday, and they're planning to visit today. He also says he'll go with them to check on Hinazuki. As Satoru runs down the path, he feels relieved that Yoshiro is stepping up to help. The child welfare staff and Yoshiro knock on Hinazuki's door but get no answer. Yoshiro goes inside and looks around. He tells the staff that Hinazuki's mom was there not long ago. He figures she must have slipped out through the veranda as soon as they rang the bell. Back at the bus, Satoru tells Hinazuki that child welfare visited, but her mom wasn't home. He assures her that things will get sorted out tonight or tomorrow. He also tells her she'll be separated from her mom soon. Hinazuki says that would make her the happiest. Then, she keeps her promise and gives Satoru the birthday present she made for him. Satoru takes it, tears streaming down his face, feeling like this was the moment he'd been waiting for. Out of nowhere, Hinazuki stuns everyone by asking Satoru to stay with her that night. She explains how someone tried to break into the bus, and she was scared. She mentions the guy left a bag behind, and Kenya opens it. Satoru immediately realizes what the stuff inside is for. He figures out they're still caught up in the cycle of the serial kidnappings and murders. Satoru talks about how back in March, Hinazuki vanished from the storage shed at home. He explains that the rubber boot prints found nearby match the boots from the Shiratori house. He keeps going over the official story of what went down. Satoru figures the bus isn't safe anymore, saying it's smack in the middle of this whole mess. He tells everyone they need to get out of there ASAP. Kenya asks if he's got a backup plan, and Satoru says he does. While unpacking, Satoru tries to picture the killer's footprint in his mind. He thinks about how to keep Hinazuki out of this situation, even if it means taking some risks. He mentions that child welfare is stepping in, and their actions are already shifting how things might play out. Turns out, Satoru's plan B is his house. They all head there and are greeted by Sachiko. She asks Satoru to explain what's going on. Holding Hinazuki's hand, Satoru says this is what happens when he refuses to give up. Sachiko gently pats Hinazuki's head and tells them she's proud of them. She heads back to the kitchen to finish making dinner and invites the kids to eat with her. After dinner, Hiro and Kenya head out. Sachiko then calls Yoshiro to let him know that Satoru and Hinazuki are at her place. She asks if Hinazuki will need to go to an orphanage, and Yoshiro says he has an idea to handle the situation. He asks Sachiko for a favor, and she agrees to think about it. Later, Sachiko checks in on the kids and says one of them should go take a bath. Satoru suggests Hinazuki go first, but she's feeling shy, so Sachiko offers to join her and help wash her hair. After everyone's had their bath, Sachiko tells them it's bedtime, and they all head to bed. The next morning, Sachiko calls them for breakfast. Hinazuki starts crying because she's never been treated so kindly before. Meanwhile, back at Hinazuki's house, her mom is throwing a tantrum and tearing the place apart. She stops when she hears the doorbell. Opening the door, she sees Hinazuki standing there. She tries to hit her but freezes when she notices Sachiko and Satoru standing with her. She snaps that she should have known they were behind this. She demands to know how they managed to hide someone else's kid. Sachiko fires back, asking if she even bothered looking for Hinazuki in the past 3 days. Akame, defensive, accuses Sachiko of trying to make her look like a bad person. Furious, she grabs a shovel and takes a swing at Sachiko, but only manages to nick her nose. Sachiko stays calm and tells Akame that all she cares about is herself and that enough is enough. Akame keeps yelling, claiming Sachiko's making her look like a villain in front of her daughter. Satoru jumps in, telling her her she deserves it for locking Hinazuki in a shed and not even caring when she disappeared for 3 days. Akame snaps back, saying Satoru doesn't understand the struggles and responsibilities of being a parent. She shoves Hinazuki and tries to hit Satoru, but workers from the Child Welfare Center step in and stop her. The workers explain they're there to talk about her daughter Keo. One of them mentions they had to ask Fujinuma for help since Akame wouldn't meet with them. Yoshiro apologizes to Sachiko for getting her involved, but Sachiko says she's glad to help and wants to give Akame a piece of her mind. Akame accuses them of kidnapping her daughter and threatens to call the cops. The workers calmly tell her they need to talk about her usual treatment of Keo. Akame, annoyed, asks what's wrong with how she treats her kid. The workers explain that Keo needs to be taken into custody because Akame didn't even try to find her when she went missing for 3 days, calling it child neglect. Akame, furious, blames Satoru and demands to know why she's being treated like a criminal. She storms off, saying she'll go to the police herself, dragging Keo along. Suddenly, a voice calls out for her to stop. Akame turns around to see her mother standing there with Yoshiro. Akame's mom kneels and begs for forgiveness, telling her how they've been distant ever since Akame split from her ex. She admits she understands how tough it is for a single mom to raise a kid. Akame flashes back to how her ex-husband used to abuse her until she finally divorced him. Overwhelmed, she hugs her mom and cries. Her mom reassures her, promising to take good care of Keo. Meanwhile, Satoru thanks Yoshiro, but Yoshiro says it's Satoru who got everyone moving. He tells Satoru that because of him, Keo will be okay now. Keo thanks Satoru for getting her out of that nightmare and leaves with her grandmother and Yoshiro. As they go, Satoru feels relieved, knowing he saved Keo and gave her a shot at a better future. Back at school, Satoru's friends call him a hero for saving Hinazuki, but he seems down in the dumps. Yoshiro shows up and calls Satoru to the staff room. He explains that Hinazuki's mom will have to stay away from her for a few years, and Keo will now start a new life with her grandmother. Satoru repeats the words Yoshiro had said to him earlier. Then Yoshiro asks if Hinazuki had been at Satoru's place the whole time. Satoru admits they hid her in an old bus that the Izumi Elementary ice hockey team wasn't using anymore. Satoru's thinking about how the killer went after Hiromi and Nakanishi Aya. He's determined not to leave either of them alone. As he's working out a plan, he realizes it's going to be tricky to get close to Nakanishi Aya since they go to different schools. At home, he asks his mom how to make friends with someone he doesn't know. She tells him to just walk up and ask them to be his friend. He mentions it's a girl who's always by herself. Sachiko tells him that kind of attitude won't get him anywhere and says he should focus on the good things that could happen. After school, Satoru tells his friends he's got to make a stop and will meet them later at the kids' center. He goes to check out Aya and observes her routine. He follows her after cram school and notes that her schedule is pretty simple. He figures if she's going to get kidnapped, it'll happen right after cram school. While he's tailing her, his mom calls him out of nowhere and asks him to give her a hand. As they're walking home, Yoshiro pulls up in his car to give them a ride. During the drive, Satoru breaks the silence and asks Yoshiro why he's not married yet. Yoshiro says you can only get married if you've got the right partner at the right time. Satoru then asks how to approach a girl he doesn't know. Yoshiro advises him to show her his good side. He explains that once she's interested, she'll let her guard down. Satoru seems impressed, and Yoshiro adds that he relies on logic because he's not great at expressing his feelings. The next day after school, Satoru and his friends head to their hideout, but they notice some stuff is missing. Satoru thinks someone must have taken it. He asks Kenya if he remembers the guy who showed up late at night when Hinazuki was there. Satoru says he's sure that guy is the murderer targeting kids. Hiromi asks why he's so certain. Satoru explains that the main reason he kidnapped Hinazuki was to protect her from the killer. Satoru talks about how back in 1988, Keo, Hiromi, and Nakanishi Aya disappeared and were later found dead. He felt like it was all his fault for not saving them and tried hard to block it out, but it left a huge hole in his heart. Satoru, Hiromi, and Kenya go to meet Aya. They all introduce themselves to her. Kenya asks about the book she's reading, and she says it's Shakespeare. Then Aya suddenly realizes who they are, saying they're the kids always sneaking into the building. Satoru admits he didn't realize their hideout was so obvious. Kenya gets annoyed and calls their hideout childish, saying boys are always sneaking around, making secret bases, and pretending to be heroes. As Aya leaves, Kazu randomly stops her and says hideouts are all about adventure for guys. She calls them a bunch of weirdos and takes off. The next day, while they're at the hideout, Hiromi tells Satoru that Aya should be at the park soon. Satoru's wondering how to get closer to her when Aya suddenly shows up and says she decided to check out their hideout. Breaking the awkward silence, Kazu welcomes her in. The day after that, Kenya asks Satoru if they're done playing detective. Satoru tells him it's not over yet. Later that night, Satoru remembers how his mom told Sawada she figured out who the real culprit was, which means it was someone she knew back in 1988. He says now that the killer doesn't have a target anymore, they'll definitely start looking for a new one. At school the next day, Hiromi stops by the staff room and bumps into Misato, who tells him to get out of her way. Later, as Hiromi and Satoru are walking home, Hiromi mentions that Misato's been keeping to herself lately, ever since that lunch money thing. Satoru says he'll talk to her on Monday. The next morning, Satoru heads to school and tells his mom, Sachiko, that he might be home late. At school, he's trying to figure out how to talk to Misato when he sees her getting on a bus. Hiromi tells Satoru that Yoshiro invited Misato to an ice hockey game. Kenya suggests they follow her, but Satoru says he'll go Yashiro alone. Satoru heads to a hockey game and spots Misato sitting all by herself. He thinks to himself that she'd be the perfect target for a killer who's already lost 2 victims at once. When she steps out, he decides to follow her. Then, Yashiro comes out of the bathroom and is stunned to see Satoru there. Satoru says he wanted to talk to Misato. They start looking for her together, but instead see a truck driving off. Satoru tells Yashiro there's something he needs to check out. As Yashiro drives, he says if what Satoru's saying is true, then it's a crime. Satoru explains it's like playing detective, a way to prevent kidnappings. He finally admits he used the excuse of things being awkward between him and Misato to justify using her as bait. Yashiro asks if that's why Satoru's been acting all buddy-buddy with people lately. Satoru says he's just trying to fill the emptiness in everyone's hearts. Yashiro tells him he might regret using Misato as bait, but there's no reason to feel guilty. He says good and bad actions are just 2 sides of the same coin, things people do to make up for their flaws. Then, Yashiro casually mentions he's done all kinds of things to get closer to someone, all while tapping his finger on the steering wheel. As they drive through a tunnel, Satoru asks if Yashiro wants some candy. Yashiro says there's no candy in the car because it's not his. That's when Satoru notices the creepy smirk on Yashiro's face. Yashiro tells him he knows Satoru lied about one thing. He's not pretending there's a kidnapper. He's acting like he's 100% sure there is one. Yashiro says he couldn't believe someone could actually figure out his thoughts. Then, as they pass the truck, Yashiro reveals the person in it isn't Misato. It's Shiratori Jun's dad. Yashiro admits he didn't suspect anything until he saw Satoru following Nakanishi Aya. He starts explaining to Satoru how he pulled off all his crimes. Satoru realizes the truth was right in front of him the whole time, but he refused to see it. He remembers seeing Yashiro's name on the suspect list at Sawada's place, but ignored it because his mom's name was on the list too, so he thought it wasn't important. Now, Satoru is in shock. Yashiro is the killer. Satoru tries to unbuckle his seatbelt, but it's stuck. Yashiro tells him it's game over for both of them. He gets out of the car and pushes it into the river, leaving Satoru trapped inside as the car sinks. Yashiro tells a story about something that went down in his past. He says it happened back in 6th grade when one of the girls in his class brought him a box with 7 or 8 hamsters in it. He took them home, filled up a big wine bottle with water, and dropped them all in. When he came back to his room 3 hours later, one hamster had survived by standing on the other's bodies. He decided to keep it and named it Spice. Ever since meeting Spice, Yashiro says he started killing anyone he saw with a thread hanging above their head. But one time, a boy messed up his plans, and then a thread appeared above the boy's head too, but the boy didn't die. Yashiro decided to keep an eye on him, and that boy was Fujinuma Satoru. The scene shifts to Sachiko, who's going about her day. As she takes a train to Ueno, she remembers Satoru's exact words from before. Later, as she wakes up to make breakfast, she goes into a room with tears in her eyes and greets Satoru's lifeless body. The next day at the hospital, Dr. Kitamura tells Satoru it doesn't feel like he's been in a coma for 15 years. He says Satoru can start rehab soon. Satoru explains how, for 15 years, his mom spent 4 hours every day taking care of him. For the last 3 years, she even used an EMS device to prep for the day he'd wake up. The doctor asks what Satoru remembers from before the coma, but Satoru can't recall much. It's like those memories are locked away. Dr. Kitamura gives him a mirror, saying his face probably looks way different now, and maybe that's why he's having trouble recognizing himself. The next day, Satoru wakes up to see his mom, who tells him he has visitors, Kenya and Hiromi, 2 of his old classmates. Kenya's now a lawyer, and Hiromi's a doctor. They chat and joke about random stuff, and Satoru enjoys catching up. Later, as Satoru finishes his exercises, a woman calls out to him. He looks up, and his eyes fill with tears. It's Hinazuki, holding a baby. Satoru congratulates her, and she tells him she's married to Hiromi, and they named the baby Mirai. Satoru realizes Hiromi had wanted to tell him this during his visit. Hinazuki says they weren't sure if they deserved to be happy since Satoru ended up in a coma because of them, but Satoru reassures her, saying his life is his own responsibility, and she shouldn't feel guilty. He believes everything that's happened is because of his own choices. Hinazuki laughs, saying he still got away with words even after 15 years in a coma. She thanks him for helping her in the past and promises to visit again. Later, Satoru sketches Keo and her baby. His mom comes in and asks how he's doing. He says he's fine and mentions that Keo stopped by. Sachiko says she ran into Keo on her way back and thought her baby was adorable. As Satoru starts to ask a question, Sachiko suddenly jumps up and closes all the curtains. When he asks why, she says reporters from gossip magazines want to cover his story now that he's awake. Dr. Kitamura comes in, and Satoru asks if he'll ever walk again. The doctor says it's up to him, so Satoru decides to double his rehab efforts. The exercises are tough, but Satoru pushes through and completes the program. One day, Satoru meets a girl named Kumi sitting outside. She tells him her surgery is coming up, and her brother is donating bone marrow to help her. She's scared but hopeful. Suddenly, a man in a suit shows up and greets Kumi. He asks Satoru if he remembers him, then introduces himself as Yashiro Gaku, Satoru's 5th grade teacher. teacher. He says he now goes by Nishizono Manabu and met Kumi at a charity event for leukemia, which is how she ended up at this hospital. The next day, Satoru meets Yashiro again and suggests they talk. Yashiro takes him to a restricted floor in the hospital via elevator. As they talk about the past, Satoru suddenly tells Yashiro that he's regained his memory. Satoru remembers how he saved Hinazuki and how they worked to make sure Nakanishi Aya and Misato weren't left alone. He calls Yashiro and tells him that his memory is back. Satoru thinks about a conversation he had with his friends. Kenya tells him that Misato said she'd stop by, which surprises Satoru since he thought she hated him. Kenya explains that Misato was actually the one who suggested a fundraiser to help cover Satoru's hospital bills. Kenya admits he was so happy to see Satoru wake up after 15 years that he avoided bringing up the past. He tells Satoru that he's already been through enough and doesn't want to add to his stress while he's still healing. Kenya also says that if Satoru plans to do anything big, he should bring his friends along. Satoru remembers something Eri once told him and realizes he has friends he can trust. That's when he finally tells them the truth. Yashiro is the killer. During their conversation, Yashiro reveals he noticed Satoru flinch when he tapped his finger on his wheelchair. He starts bragging about how Satoru ruined his plan 15 years ago and asks how Satoru was able to predict his moves. Yashiro figures out that Satoru has a phone in his pocket, takes it, and stops the recording. Yashiro points out that the statute of limitations has passed for the crimes from 15 years ago and accuses Satoru of trying to get him to confess to newer crimes. He smugly says Satoru will never be able to catch him. Then Yashiro shows Satoru a text from Kumi-chan and reveals that her IV bags are laced with muscle relaxants that have his fingerprints on them. Yashiro claims that Satoru has mercifully given Kumi an easy death and that guilt will drive Satoru to take his own life by jumping off the roof. Yashiro taunts him, saying even if Satoru could guess his thoughts, it wouldn't change anything, but he says there's still a chance to save Kumi if Satoru cooperates. Then Yashiro coldly adds that time's up. Yashiro says he'll put his heart into writing Satoru's last words to his mom. Satoru remembers telling his mom that his memory had returned and how he wanted to live life fully by digging deeper and going the extra mile. He tells Yashiro about how his father left when he was born, and he doesn't even know what his dad looks like. He says Yashiro took on that role in his life, like a father figure. Yashiro admits he spent 15 years waiting for Satoru to wake up, and when he lost him, he lost the impulse that drove him. Satoru reminds Yashiro that he saved Hinazuki, Nakanishi, Hiromi, Yuki, and even his mom, who Yashiro killed in the future. Yashiro is confused and asks what he means by the future. Satoru explains that he was able to stop Yashiro's plans because he knows what's going to happen. That's how he kept everyone safe. Yashiro says he could have killed Satoru anytime he wanted and could do it right now, but Satoru confidently points out that Yashiro didn't do it for 15 years because he needed him. As Yashiro moves closer, Satoru suddenly hits him and tries to jump off the roof, but Yashiro grabs him and stops him. Yashiro stares at Satoru and remembers trying to kill him while he was in a coma. Satoru tells Yashiro that even though he killed some of his friends, he doesn't hate him anymore because Yashiro is the only person who truly knows him. Yashiro, with tears in his eyes, lets go of Satoru's wheelchair and falls off the building. As he's about to jump too, saying he can't live without Satoru, he notices a foam cushion set up below by Satoru's mom and friends, who anticipated what would happen. The police arrest Yashiro for attempted murder. Kenya asks if Kumi is okay, and Satoru says they didn't tell her what happened because of her upcoming surgery. Satoru reflects on how he lost 14 years of his life, from ages 11 to 25. He says that lost time is like a treasure because during that period, his friends lived their lives for him. Now, Satoru works as a mangaka and has experienced a revival since the last one. He takes a trip to Hokkaido, meets up with his childhood friends, and they all hang out, catching up and enjoying their time together.